Hey, Connexus Church, Mark Clark here. Hopefully you are doing well. The Aurelia campus, the Bber campus, so good to be with you for this series that we are doing on The Problem of Life, which is a book that I wrote, and you guys can get copies at all your campuses, and it unpacks kind of 11 big principles so that you flourish versus flounder in life. And today we're talking about, this is week 2, a really big principle in life, that you are not trying to be God in your life. And if you try to be God in your life, you're going to create a disaster. So really good to be with you. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mark. I am originally from Toronto. And so shout out to all the Toronto crew here. And then I moved to Vancouver for 18 years. And now I live in the United States of America. And so sorry. All right, I don't know what to say about this. I'm doing my best, guys. Don't blame me, all right, for the tariffs. But I don't know what's going on. I'm just sorry. I'm down there. I don't know what to do. But we love you, all right. On behalf of America, we love you. And so, yeah. Anyway, so here's what we're doing, guys. We are talking about how to flourish versus flounder in life in this series, 4 weeks. This is week 2, and really there are mechanical things. The way God has set up the world, there are mechanical things you can do to make life flourish versus not flourish, right? If you do this, you're going to go better than if you do that, or if you don't do this. And so, an example of this would be, of course, in our marriages, right? If you do certain things in your marriage is going to flourish. If you do other things in your marriage, it's not going to flourish. For instance, last week, no joke, my garbage day is Friday, and I took all the bins. I woke up, I took all my garbage bins and I walked them out to I live like half a mile. My wife made me move, and so I live half a mile from the road where my garbage bins go. So I trekked them all out and I put them there, and I look, and all the lids for my neighbor's bins are already open. And I'm like, oh gosh, I've missed garbage day, which you know is the worst possible thing that can happen. So I go back home, my wife's like, what is wrong with you? I'm like, they took the garbages so early this morning. And she's like, it's 11 o'clock in the morning, bro. They didn't take them early, you're dumb. I'm like, yeah, maybe a good point. So that's not gonna go well for my marriage. Anytime that you forget to take out the garbage, your marriage ain't gonna flourish. Can I get an amen from the ladies? Right? That's what I'm talking about, guys. So here's the thing. It's the same thing is true about life. There are certain things that if you do them, things are going to go well. There's other things if you do them, it's not going to go so well. So this is what we're talking about today, is this one big principle of don't try to be God. Now, here's how I want to start, okay? There was here's a quote from a guy named John Doerr, okay? And he had successfully invested in Google and a dozen other startups, was a multi-millionaire. And here's what he said: this product will become more important than the internet, about the invention in front of him. And he invested $80 million. And he told others that this company would be the fastest company ever to reach $1 billion in net worth. Steve Jobs declared it the most amazing piece of technology since the personal computer, and offered $63 million for just a 10% stake in the company. The inventor himself was described by many as the next Thomas Edison. The company projected it would be producing 10,000 units a week within 1 year of going public. You want to know what that product was? The Segway. Now, how many of you own a personal computer? How many of you are on the internet? How many of you own a Segway? All right, yeah. Here's the thing, man, a bit of an overreach, all right? And so John Doerr later came out and he said, I made some pretty bold predictions that were dead wrong. Here's the thing. Have you ever thought too highly of yourself? This is what happens in life. We overinflate our estimation of human potential, and life goes wrong. This is literally what the Bible story tells us. The biblical story lays out a worldview that says, yes, as we talked about last week, you have this ache inside of you that longs for the Creator, and God wired you for something, but a problem in your life is that you try to be God versus being created by God in the everyday things of your life. And so Genesis chapter 3 is where the best story about how we got here is. Genesis 3 is called the fall. For those of you who are new to church, God made the world, he made human beings, and then this happened. Genesis 3 verse 1. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden? And of course, God hadn't said that. He had said, you can eat from any tree in the garden except from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So Satan takes the word of God and skews it, which is a lot of the problems that actually arise in life is when Satan says, did God really say? And then we go, yeah, did God really say that? Did God really say that? So the woman said to the serpent, we may eat from the trees in the garden, but God did say, you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it or you will die. Die physically, spiritually, emotionally. You will not certainly die, the serpent said to the woman, for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be open, and listen to this, you will be like God, knowing good and evil. This is the temptation put in front of human beings, that you not have to deal with the human limitation anymore. You don't have to deal with not knowing stuff. You don't have to deal with being not powerful, that you can be God. And you look back at Adam and Eve and you go, what a bunch of losers. I can't believe they fell for that. Listen, you fall for it every day. You try to control your life. You try to control everything around you. And this is the thing that makes your life not flourish. Verse 6, when the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. Notice this, oftentimes people look at the women and they go, yeah, how could you have been deceived by Satan? You must be weak. I can't believe the women. Listen, the text just said her husband was right there with her, right? He was standing there and doing what men have been doing ever since. It's like, all right, whatever, all right? Just called the silence of Adam. It's like, hey, eat this. And he goes, all right, whatever, doesn't even think about it. And so what happens? The eyes of both of them were open and they realized they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. Here's the idea. We face it every day. We don't accept the fact that we aren't God. We don't accept the fact of human limitation. And so we try to be God. Every single day of our life, we try to be God. And so here's where it goes wrong. If you jump out of an airplane without a parachute, you are fighting the way that the world has been set up. If you try to breathe underwater, you are not literally crafted or designed by God to breathe underwater. You don't have gills. And so you're pushing against the way you were created. And only when you function in the way you're created do you actually flourish in life. But what happens is we have an inflated estimation of human potential and even ourselves within the world. We think too highly of ourselves. We overshoot. So there was a study done a few years ago, Time magazine. And here's what it asked. And of course, like I said, I live among Americans as a Canadian missionary among the Americans, all right? So I have to learn these people and how they think and whatever. And I'm up there and I'm doing my best, all right? And to bring the Canadian ways. And there was a study done of Time magazine. And it said this. It asked the question, are you in the top 1% of the nation's earners to Americans? And 20% said yes. 20% of Americans said that they are in the top 1% of earners. So clearly, those Americans have a little heightened view of themselves. Of course, I'm just a humble Canadian who's like, no, I would never be in the 1%. I'm just one of the many. All the poppies are the same size. Where Americans are like, yeah, what's up? I'm part of the 1%. Don't tell me any different, right? This is what happens to the human spirit, is we overestimate, we overthink. So here's what happened to me. A guy told me years ago of this little hack when I go to hotels. He said, if you go to a hotel, the person behind the desk has all the power. And so just wrap a $20 bill around your credit card when you hand it to them and say, thank you for everything you do. And if there's anything you can do for me, let me know. And usually your hotel experience just goes through the roof. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is awesome. So this is what I did. I put it, and I got the Michael Jordan suite when I was in Vegas. Like these people like, yes, I got $20. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And I was like, man, this is the best thing ever. And then I went and I was hanging out with a bunch of pastor leaders, and this mentor of ours had gathered about 20 of us at this hotel. We're sitting there, and this hotel owner, the CEO of all these hotels, came to teach us about running a company. And so we're all sitting there together, and he walks up and he's teaching us about all the staff development and how to create great culture. And I'm like, yeah. And the other thing is if you wrap a 20 around a credit card and you hand it to the guy behind the counter, your room opens up. Right, bro? And he's like, sorry, what? And I'm like, what? And he's like, he was so offended. And he's like, how dare you say that about my industry? Handing $20 to people and you get, this is lying. This is stealing. I can't believe you're saying this as a pastor. What is wrong with you? And he's like, what? And I'm like, I don't understand. He's like, it's a violation of our industry. He's like, what if I walked into a church and I wrapped a $20 bill and I went to the Connect desk and I said, well, now hopefully I can get access to Mark. And I'm like, I don't know, it'd probably be helpful, to be honest with you. All right, I mean, access, $20 would probably go a long way. I might call you back, right? And he's like, this is ridiculous. And I realized at that moment, I overestimated my thinking. I thought this gotta be fine. My ego made me think I'm gonna share this cool idea with all these pastors and they're gonna think I'm legit. And this guy cut me down to size. And I realized so often in life, we need these moments where God reminds us that we are not who we think we are. Listen, the book of Ecclesiastes says that the universe was not set up for us to be gods and goddesses. We are going to fail, and it's the admission of our failure. It's the admission of our weakness that actually makes us flourish. Charles Spurgeon years ago, he said this, stop trying to bring God your strength. He has all of that. Bring him your weakness. He has none of that himself. That's where we actually begin to flourish in life. And so, here's what we have. Highest levels of depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, fear in our history of the Western world since we've been tracking these things is happening right now. And yet, we've advanced in technology, we've advanced in science, we've advanced in social ideas, and yet we're more anxious, we're more afraid, we're more lonely. Why? Because we are not gods. We think we need to be in control all the time. And the problem is when you try to control your life and try to control the outcomes of every scenario and try to control the people around you, it ends up kicking back on you, because what you do is you end up not only crushing yourself, because there's no way you can be in control of every outcome, you end up crushing the people that you're trying to control. You go into work and you try to control work, everyone's gonna resent you. You try to control your kids. Some of you are in this scenario right now where you're trying to control everything. You try to control where the grandkids live. You try to control where your kids live. You try to, if your kids are young, you're gonna control what school they go to, what job they're gonna do. You are a control freak, and that's because of Genesis chapter 3, and it's sin. Because you're not, listen, when my kid was 9, okay, and she's now 18, and some of you, here's the thing, you think, oh, I'm not a control freak, my kids love me, but it's because you have little kids. See, when you have little kids, they got no choice but to love you, man. They're 6, all right? They can't eat without you. They can't sleep without, they're like, Mama, I love you, come sleep with me. And you're like, my kid's gonna love me like this forever. Ha! Now I have an 18-year-old, all right? Now that's a choice for her to love me and hang out with me, all right? And so it's like, Dad, you're a loser. I'm like, I thought I was your hero. It's like, yeah, when I was 6, now I got a choice, and I'm gonna go out and hang with my friends because you're a loser. And I'm like, what is going on? What happened? And you try to control, and when your kids grow up, they're gonna be like, I gotta eliminate myself from this control because I gotta live my own life. When Sienna was 9, though, it was the first time she walked up to me and said, Dad, can I go out and just have a walk with my friend? Can I walk to the coffee shop and just go hang out? And I'm like, what? You can't walk to the coffee shop by yourself? I'm like, in my brain, right? The parents of today, you're like, no, that kid, what am I, like, look, I grew up in the 80s, all right? Any 80s people, raise up your hands, all the campuses online. Yeah, you're an 80, you grew up in the 80s. I grew up in the 80s. My parents didn't even know where I was, man. I was just gone from the moment I woke up. It's like, make sure you're back by midnight. And I take my bike out and I just be like out. And my parents had no idea. It's like a van pulls up with some guy. I'm like, yeah, candy, right? And that was my life. My parents never oversaw me, nothing. But now my generation reacts to that, and we watch, we helicopter parent. And I was like, no, man, I'm not letting you. So finally my wife, I'm like, hey, should we let Sienna go on this little walk with her friend without any of us around? And my wife's like, absolutely not. We should not follow her. And I'm like, okay, you're winking, which tells me you want me to do it, but you're saying you don't want me to do it. And she's like, no, we can't just follow our kid around. I do not want you going. I'm like, okay, I don't even know what you're saying anymore. I think you're saying no so that if she comes back later and she's mad at me, then you can say you said no, but you're winking because you really want me to do it. And she's like, absolutely not. You shouldn't follow her. I'm like, okay, I don't know if you got Tourette's. I don't know what's going on. I'm out. All right, so I got in my truck and I followed this little girl. And she's walking, and she's out with her friend, and I'm hanging out in a coffee shop, and I'm watching her from a distance, and she walked all the way home, and I'm like sitting there trying to follow her because now, like, this is what we do, right? In our culture, we control too much. Have you guys got the Life 360 app, right? This is new to me. My family has introduced me to this app where they can see where I am at all times, right? They know exactly what I'm doing, and I'm freaking out because my wife, literally a couple weeks ago, she went away on a trip, and I was like, oh, this is awesome. She's gone. I can play golf all day. So I go golfing. I'm sitting at the golf course. I'm playing. I go to leave the golf course. My kids are at home, waiting for dinner or whatever. I don't know what they're doing. And I'm playing golf, and I go to leave, and a text pops up and goes, oh, playing golf all day, eh? Question mark, exclamation mark, mad face. I'm like, Life 360, why do you know too much? And this is what we're talking about. This is what God is saying. You're not supposed to have the knowledge of good and evil. You're not supposed to know everything. You're not supposed to be omniscient. You're not supposed to be omnipotent, meaning knowing all things and controlling all things, because what'll happen is you'll crush the people you're trying to control. Talk to spouses where the other spouse controls everything they do all the time, and it crushes them, and they start to resent them. Talk to coworkers, they control me. All of those things are God saying, listen, the worst thing you can do in life is try to control and be in control, because here's the thing, you have no power. God is the one with the power. And until you begin to realize that, your life will flounder instead of flourish. Here's how I know. Because there's been moments in my life, and maybe some of you are here and you're skeptics or you're new to Christianity. We're glad you're here. And maybe some of you are like, man, I don't know about this God. Listen, there's been events in my life where they happen and I can never control. I can never, supernaturally, there's no better explanation than they supernaturally just came to be. All right, the time that God told me to go and visit this woman at our church, he said, I want you to go to her house, knock on the door, visit her, and encourage her. And I'm like, this is weird. I don't understand this. Why am I doing this? And he said, just do it. So I walked up, I found her address, and I walked up. And there was this old lady in our church, probably 85 years old. And I said, hey, how you doing? She's like, hello. And I walked in her house, and I said, hey, how you doing? I spent 2 or 3 hours with her chatting about theology and Bible and praying together. And I went to leave, and she's like, why did you come here? I'm like, I don't know. And she's like, I'll tell you why. Because when I woke up this morning, I walked down the stairs and I said to myself, I am so depressed and I'm so angry at life that I'm going to take my own life today. Unless, God, you send someone to my front door to knock on it and encourage me. And I fell asleep in the chair and I woke up to you knocking on the door. That's why you were here. And I would, look, if God doesn't exist, explain that to me. See, here's the beautiful thing. God shows up and he does a thing. I remember a few years ago, we were running multi-site church out of Vancouver, and we were planting a couple churches in Toronto and in the greater Toronto area. And I didn't know who was going to run them, and I got asked to speak at this conference in Toronto. So I came out, flew in, grabbed my rental car, drove up to the event center, and I get to the front door and there's this guy standing there and he's like, hey, come in. I'm like, hey, hi, good to meet you. Hey, what's your name? My name is Finu. Hey, what's your name? Mark. But I got up, speak at the conference, went in the back room, sitting in the back room, looking at my notes. His wife's back there hanging out. They're chatting, and all of a sudden, God says to me, he's the one. And I'm like, what? What do you mean? He's the one. And I looked and I'm like, he's the one for what? He's the one. And so I looked, I said, hey, Finu, what are you doing? And here's the thing. I was looking for a pastor to take over a whole bunch of things in regard to Toronto, leading those campuses, and potentially even coming out to Vancouver and helping lead and preach at that time. And so I didn't know this guy from Adam, and God goes, he's the one. And I looked at him and said, Finu, you're the one. He's like, for what? And I'm like, I'll tell you this afternoon. Let's go out for lunch. And on my way to the airport, we went out for lunch, and no joke, I'm sitting across the table from him, and I said, God told me you're supposed to leave whatever you're doing in life and come and work for us at Village Church and do this thing. And he just goes stark white, and he's like, what? And he's like, wait a minute. And he pulls his phone out, and he hits play. And it's a woman at a prayer event prophesying over him 6 months earlier. And it's the audio. She says, I'm going to say a prophetic word over you. And he says, can I record it? And he hits record, and she speaks a word over him and says, somebody from Vancouver, Canada, from British Columbia is going to come out and speak a word into your life to change the very direction of your life, and you better listen. That's what she says to the guy. And he's like, I thought whoever was coming out from British Columbia was coming to give me money. And here you come saying, I got to leave my job. And that's what he did. He left his job. He oversaw our campuses. And when I left Village and went down to Bayside, down in Sacramento 3 years ago, now he was just installed as one of my replacements at Village Church in Vancouver as the senior pastor and main preacher of that church. That's how God works. And you want to try to be God? You want to try to figure life out and land everything? He's so much more powerful than you. On his worst day, he's more powerful than you. And you're trying to control everything, and he's going, don't fall into the sin of Adam and Eve, who said, I'm not happy with human limitation. It's when you humble yourself and actually realize that he's in control, which is why Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit at the beginning of the Beatitudes. So here's two images culturally of where I think this goes, okay? First is science. We have scientifically advanced, technologically advanced to such a point where we now are trying to be gods in the realm of technology. And so if you look at AI, okay, AI, when we're fusing ourselves together, AI is, it's omniscient, it's knowing all the information of the internet, and it's pulling it together. But what we're doing now is we're fusing ourselves together. Companies like Neuralink and others are actually fusing the human brain. There's a guy named Nolan Arbaugh who actually, he was paralyzed, and they fused his brain to Neuralink, and he can actually move computers and think and do all of these things through computer just by thinking about it. He doesn't have to say anything. He doesn't have to look. He just has to think. And this is where we're going as a culture, where they're going to develop something in the coming years where we're going to be able to fuse our brains with AI, with the internet, so we can be omniscient, where we can actually start to think like gods. And here's the problem, guys. We already know how this ends. If you've seen Terminator 2, you know how this story ends. The robots turn on us, they look at us, and they go, wait a minute, we don't need them. Bam, and we're all gone, right? Paula Boddington, who's a writer, she says this: if we see the Genesis account of the fall of man as a foreshadowing of fears about robots, then Genesis gets the problem exactly right. What might robots do if we can't control them fully? Will they decide to obey us? What will our relationship with our creation be? We can thank Genesis for pre-warning us. It's this idea that we try to be in control of all things when we should surrendering control to the God of the universe who made us. This is one of the solutions to the problem of life, is submitting to him, recognizing that we cannot make things happen on our own, listen, okay, so I wrote a book a few years ago called The Problem of God. Some of you have read it. Goes through all the skeptical questions of Christianity, the problem of God. And the way that book got published was because I had done some sermon series stuff, and I had written the manuscript. And a guy came to me one day, and he's like, listen, no one's going to publish this, all right, because you're Canadian, right? He's like, like, no one wants to read stuff. You got no one in Canada's a Christian, so nobody's going to care about this book. He's like, so what you need to do is you need to get an agent. And I'm like, okay, get me an agent. So the guy got me an agent. She hired me. And she said, okay, you got the manuscript, it's all set, it's good, sign the contracts, everything, we're your agent. Okay, now all you need to do, the last step in this whole thing, is you need to shoot a video where you're explaining to all the book publishers how great you are. Okay, basically just tell them how great you are and why they should publish your book, and you're a life changer and all these things. And so I said, okay, well, send me a video. And so she sent me a couple videos of guys who had done it in the past, and they were like sitting there in their offices with their suits on, looking all smart in front of all their books, and they're like, hi, I'm Joe, and you should publish my book because I'm great and I've accomplished great things, and look at all my books. And I'm like, I don't like this. This is weird. So then I'm like, oh, I have an idea. So I shot a video which parodied all of those videos, right? So basically I made fun of all those guys. So I had this video where I was in my office, and I'm like, hey, everybody, I'm so smart. You should publish my book. And then I had like staff members, kind of like The Office, that were being interviewed to talk how great I am. And I was clearly coaching them off camera, and they were reading things that I wrote for them to say, all of this stuff. And I'm just mocking the whole system. And I send it off to my agent, and a couple of days later, and I'm thinking in my brain, talk about overestimating my human potential. I'm like, oh, she's going to love this video. This is going to be the greatest. She's going to be walking around the office. You got to watch this. She emails me back. She's like, what is this? And I'm like, what? She's like, what is this? You're making fun of everybody. Why are you being a jerk? And I'm like, have you not met me? I'm like, this is kind of my shtick. I'm like the Deadpool of marketing in a world of Captain Americas, right? I'm like, of course I'm making fun of it because it's a joke. It's what is this? And she goes, you're fired. I'm like, sorry, I'm what? She's like, you're fired. I'm no longer your agent. I don't like your attitude. I'm like, I've never been fired for anything in my life. And I worked at Michael's Arts and Crafts store for 5 years. All right, we're talking Red Apron. Still couldn't tell you where a googly eye is. And somehow I survived that. But this agent fires me after a week. And I'm like, okay, well, there's my writing career. Done. And so I called one of my mentors, lives down in San Diego, great guy. He published these books through Zondervan. His name is Larry. And we're chatting about life. And he's like, hey, what are you up to? I'm like, oh, I'm just doing it. He's like, hey, how'd that book thing go? I'm like, oh, I got fired by my agent. Don't worry about it. And he's like, well, send me the manuscript. So I sent him the manuscript. He reads it. And he said, hey, I really love this. Do you mind if I put this on the desk of the president of Zondervan? I'm like, well, I mean, I guess. I mean, I'm shopping it around a bit, but sure. What? Yes, of course. He puts it on his desk. Next day, president emails me and says, I want to publish this book. I'm sending you a contract. And the book got published a year later. Why? Not because of me, but because Larry Osborne. See, if you're going to succeed in life, you know what happens? See, you're going to mess up. You're going to fail. You're going to fumble it. You're going to get fired. Your spouse isn't going to like you from time to time. Your work's not going to like you. The finances are going to go bad. Here's the thing. You need other people in order to flourish in life. And that kind of humility is hard to come by. You got to recognize it's the people who are going to help you succeed. Some of you are like, yeah, I started my own business. I've become self-made successful. False. You needed that break. You needed that person to mentor you, to help you out, to give you that seed money, whatever it is. The story of the fall is telling us, don't get too haughty. Don't get ahead of yourself. So in one way, we as a culture are doing that in regard to science. Here's the other way we're doing it. We're doing it in regard to sexuality. All right, here's the thing. The question of gender is a very popular one in our culture. Genesis comes right out of the bat and it says, hey, listen, when I made people, I made them male and female. And what we've started to do as a culture is say, well, we're not happy with that. We want to kind of go inside of ourselves, feel something out, and then become something that maybe, one writer, Philip Reif, who's a philosopher, says no culture has ever survived and flourished when it kicks back against created order. And what we tend to do in this conversation is we tend to say, hey, listen, I'm not happy with this human limitation. I want to become something that the physical world doesn't point me to do. And so what happens is we start to say, well, sex and gender, these are things that I can construct in my own mind. And Genesis 1 and 2 talk about the fact that they are set. And so Dr. Bber, who's a doctor who deals with some of this stuff, she says this. Biological sex is either male or female. Sex is defined by gametes, which are reproductive cells. There are only two types, small ones called sperm that are produced by males and large ones called eggs produced by females. Biology, not society, dictates whether we are gender typical or atypical. When sperm fertilizes an egg at about 7 weeks, if the embryo is male, it floods the brain with testosterone, masculizing the brain. If the embryo is a female, this process does not occur. So we are male and female right down to the cellular level, right? Women have XX chromosomes, men have XY chromosomes, right down to the brain level, the cells, the lungs, the joints. And it's interesting because the creation story tells us what you and I know. If we've ever interacted with a different gender, we know that the sexes are different, right? Men and women are different. I know I'm gonna blow your mind here. Listen, I have 3 daughters, which means I have 4 mothers at home, right? And when I had those 3 daughters, I had to figure out how women think. So if you are at all engaged with any woman ever, you need to go read this book called The Female Brain. It's by a neuropsychiatrist, not Christian. Her name is Dr. Luann Brizendine. It's called The Female Brain. And I remember reading that book, and what she talks about is the differences between male and female. And so when a female is in utero, what happens is estrogen floods her brain, all right? And what happens when estrogen floods the brain of a female is that the left and right hemispheres of the brain communicate with one another through the corpus callosum. And when estrogen floods the brain, it enhances the ability for those two things to talk to each other. It becomes a super highway of information, and that's why women can multitask. When a boy is in utero, that brain isn't flooded with estrogen, it's flooded with testosterone. And here's what happens. Do you know what testosterone does to the brain? Kills it. Testosterone floods the male brain, increasing sexual urges and aggression, and kills the ability for the left and right hemisphere to communicate with each other in the brain, which is why, by the way, when he's looking in the fridge, he really doesn't see it. He's like, "Why? Where's the ketchup?" And it's like, what? It's science. And that's why the women can just come out of nowhere and multitask, like, here it is, idiot, right? And just move on with their life. Those are different worlds. Men and women are vastly different right down to the cellular level. Here's what she says. The male brain is 9% larger than the female brain, but men and women have the same number of brain cells. The cells of women are simply packed more densely into a smaller skull. The female brain develops 2 years earlier than the male brain. And if you know little boys and little girls, if you guys have little sons and daughters, you know that's true. Women tend to develop a couple years earlier than men do, which is why when you have little kids and you put them in a room and little girls are playing together, what are they doing? They're playing house, they're creating companies. They're like, hey, let's be entrepreneurs and build an empire and have a family. And boys come in and they're like, war, death, and it's like, oh my gosh, there is a difference between these two sexes and genders in the way that they think and what they value. Luann Brizendine says that she put little girls in a room with a fire truck, and the little girls would pick up the fire truck, and within 5 minutes, they would wrap it in a little blanket, and they'd be rocking it to sleep, going, it's okay, little fire, it's okay, Chucky, right? And little boys would come into that room and be like, and just bam, 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 all right? This is what happens. And so she talks about the differences. She says the female brain is more attuned to doing things like reading faces, hearing emotional tones and voices, responding to unspoken cues and others. A machine that tells us they are built for connection. Here's the point. Male, female, it's not wrong. It's just different. They have different ideas. They have different values. Here's the thing. We as a culture used to make fun of Christians for following the science when it came to questions. And we would say, hey, listen, you're supposed to follow the science, but you don't follow the science. You listen to your prayer life, you have your little subjective experience with God, but what you're supposed to do is follow the science. You're supposed to follow the cold, hard facts of the laboratory. Now, we as a culture have flipped that. And we have said, when it comes to this question, don't follow science, because science is leading us in this direction. Just follow what you feel inside. And the problem with that is what we feel inside is not a great principle at times to flourish versus flounder in life. Anybody who's been married and gone through a dry spell in their marriage when it comes to intimacy knows how difficult it is. That sometimes if you've been intimate in months and you go to the grocery store and all of a sudden there's a woman there and she's flashing her eyelashes at you and she's talking to you like you're awesome and she has like real pants on, and you've been like, oh my gosh. Oh, my heart feels this. My insides, my subjective experience feels this. Be very careful, because what you feel in life sometimes can derail you. So God comes and he goes, I've created this sacred order that I don't want you to kick against. I don't want you to try to take your own identity into your own hands. We respond to the sacredness of what God has laid out in front of us, because how we feel sometimes leads us astray, even though it can be powerful. My family recently was in Nashville and they didn't want to fly home because my kids didn't like the turbulence. So like, Dad, can we drive home? I'm like, drive home? It's gonna take you 6 days to drive home. So how did I solve it? I sent them some data. I said, hey kids, don't you understand? If you drive home, you have a 1 in 5,000 chance of dying in a car accident. If you fly home, it's 1 in 11 million. Oh, great. Do you think that data solved it? No, because when they get in that plane, they feel something. But sometimes the data doesn't care how we feel. My wife the other day, she's like, hey, listen, you know what I think? I think I sleep better when you're traveling. And I'm like, sorry, wait, what? She's like, I sleep better when you're away. I'm like, I can't believe what you're saying, because I know where this is going. I know where this is going. She's going down a road where I'm gonna be, in 5 years, it's gonna be Fred Flintstonesville, all right? I'm gonna be sleeping in a different room. She'll be in her own. She's like, you snore, you roll around. I'm like, no, honey, this isn't true. You're just feeling this in this moment. And she's like, actually, I'm not. You see, my little ring here tracks my sleep patterns. And you know what it has said for the last 3 nights that you've been away? What? It said that I have optimum sleep. And I'm like, okay, well, she goes, let's see what it says tonight. I'm like, okay. So I went to bed, slept, I woke up. So what did it say? She looks at the data. She's like, terrible sleep whatever you did last night, never do it again, whatever. This is like, oh my God. And I'm like, what? See, here's the thing. Sometimes the data doesn't care how you feel. I could sit there all day and try to convince her of what's right and wrong, but the data is the data is the data. And God, what we're talking about in this series, is God has set the world up in a particular way and said, man, follow this. This is how you're gonna flourish. And versus flounder in life, I have created the universe in this way, and you're not supposed to try to be God, but you're trying to. This is what Martin Bber, the philosopher, years ago said. He says the primary challenge that we face as a culture is the enthroning of the self as the greatest authority. And this is exactly what we have to try to be against. Is we, in our culture, what we've done is we've said that the self is the most important thing. And so in past generations, what used to happen is you'd have people would do, they would do a revolution of, and they'd say social revolution. Let's deal with civil rights, or let's deal with racism, or let's deal with slavery, or let's deal with all these things, and let's change social structures. And now, Martin Bber says, the problem is that all we're about is personal revolution. It's just about the individual. And this is what the fall story is telling us we have to be careful of, is that we understand that we're not the masters in the story. We are the servants in the story. And this is why some of us are struggling with, should I come to know Christ? I want to try to be in control. I want to try to keep my life. And New Age philosophy will tell you got to find yourself. You got to go inside yourself and find yourself. And Christianity comes along and says the opposite. C.S. Lewis, in what I think is the best book ever written. It's my favorite book. It's my Go on an Island and you only got one book. Mere Christianity is the book that I would take. And here's how Lewis ends Mere Christianity, the very last paragraph. Listen to this. He says this: this principle runs through all life from top to bottom. Give up yourself and you will find your real self. Lose your life and you will save it. Submit to death of your ambitions and favorite wishes every day, and death of your whole body in the end. Submit with every fiber of your being and you will find eternal life. Nothing that you have not given away will ever be really yours. Nothing in you that has not died will ever be raised from the dead. Look for yourself and you will find in the long run only hatred, loneliness, despair, rage, ruin, and decay. But look for Christ and you will find him, and with him, everything else thrown in. That's what we're doing when we look to Jesus and we understand, what did Jesus do? Listen, when you read Philippians chapter 2, Paul says this. He says, talking about Christ, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, being found in the appearance as a man. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. You know what that is? Here's what hit me when I was reading Philippians 2 the other day. Philippians 2 is the opposite of what Adam and Eve did. You see, Adam and Eve were sitting in the garden and they said to themselves, I want to grasp at being God. I'm a human, but I want to grasp at being God and leave behind my humanness. It's a thing you do every day when you try to control, when you try to be a God, when you try to be the center of the story. Jesus is God and decided to give that up, in a sense, or add humanness to it for 33 years and ungrasp and come down and die as a lowly, humble servant on a cross for you. He lived a perfect life in your place that you could never live. I don't care how successful you are. I don't think how cool you are. I don't care how many relationships you've had. I don't care if you got the nicest house. He died for you because you could not go to heaven by your own success, your own morality. He died on a cross, taking your sin, and then rose again from death to give you life. And the question is, what are you going to do with that? Today, what are you going to do with that? Monday morning when you wake up, what are you going to do with the fact that he ungrasped and did all that for you? So, Father in heaven, I pray online campus, Barry, Aurelia, that we would be people watching this right now, affected by the beauty of the gospel, that instead of grasping at power, you gave it up to save us. And I pray every single soul in here would begin to recognize that we completely flounder in life when we try to be gods, but that we would humble ourselves to recognize we are the servants, not the masters, and that by your grace you save us, you love us, you empower us to great things. Let us give our hearts into your care versus trying to control our life, everything about us, every outcome, every person, every way of happiness. Some of us are trying to get happy and find joy, and we think that we know how to do it. And as you're saying here, no. It's only in Jesus that true joy ever happens. Let us die to ourselves and live for you. In your good name we pray, Jesus. Amen. Amen.